Week 2 of the VNL was interesting. It was incredibly interesting. We saw some banger matches. We saw some really interesting results. And after 2 weeks of the Men's 2026 Volleyball Nations League, we have a much better idea of kind of the landscape of men's international volleyball at the moment. So just like in week 1, I will be giving all 18 teams a grade for how they did in week number 2 of the VNL. This will just be specifically for their play in week number 2. It won't take anything into week number 1 into account. So before we go and give the grades, this is what the standings look like right now. We got Japan in that top spot, the only undefeated team at 8-0. In second place, you have the USA with 19 points. Third place, Poland with 17 points. Fourth place, Slovenia with 14 points, but they've got a 6-2 record, so that's why they are ahead of both Ukraine, who had a massive week 2, Italy, a little bit sus, a little bit up and down, won't lie, or let's say down and up for Italy in week 2. They are in 6th right now at 5-3. Turkey in 7th. Big breakout week over there in Poland. They are 5-3 as well. Bulgaria also at 5-3. Brazil, man, how the mighty have fallen. They are at 9th at 5-3. And then you've got Germany, Serbia, in France in 10th, 11th, and 12th at 4-4. You've got Belgium in 13th at 3-5. Iran and Argentina. Argentina's finally on the board in 14th and 15th at 2-6. Canada, ouch, at 16th at 1-7. China in 17th at 1-7, and Cuba pulling up the rear, 0-8 so far, and firmly in that relegation race with only 2 points. And we're going to start things off with Argentina. And now Argentina back on the horse, going 2-2 in week 2 after going winless in week number 1. They outlasted Germany in a barn burner of a 5-setter to open up the week in a match where they only made 19 errors in 5 sets. This is crazy. That was for their first win. Then they steamrolled over China before once again going the distance against Turkey. They had them on the ropes. They're up 2-0. Turkey pulled off that reverse sweep, and then ended the week with a tough loss against Poland, where they won the longest set in VNL history, 50-48. They basically played 2 sets, right? Not basically, they did. They played 2 sets over the course of that first set, which is absolutely wild. Argentina in general just looked a lot better in week number 2. We saw some other guys step up. Manuel Armoa was great. Herman Gomez also stepped up as well. They are still being led by Luciano Vicentin, and he has been kind of their go-to guy, but luckily there is a little bit of support offensively for him. We even saw Augustin Lozère step up at a certain point. You know, I mentioned Armoa, and he was big, really big, especially against Poland with 23 points. He hit 62% with a 46% efficiency, but also was passing 63% positive, 16% perfect on 43 targets. And I mean, Polonsky hasn't really been out there producing all that much, so it's great to see one of the Argentinian guys getting going other than Vicentin. Now, I do think there's a conversation to be had by the fact that Argentina won their 2 games where Matias Sanchez started against Germany and China, and then lost the 2 games with Luciano Cicheco starting against Turkey and Poland. Now, I will give it to the fact that both Turkey and Poland are better teams than Germany and China, but still, I do think there's a conversation there to be had about who should be the starter for this Argentinian team, but I just don't know if I'm ready for that yet. But after going 2-2 and getting a point against Turkey, winning the longest set against Poland, I'm going to be giving Argentina a B-. Next up, we have Belgium, and the Waffles are looking like that wear and tear of the VNL is starting to get to them, right? They went the distance with Poland, where they looked outstanding throughout the first 2 sets, and they let it slip away, took care of business against China, and then let it slip against Germany, and then finished off the week, and then let it slip against both Germany and Turkey, where they just did not look as good as they did earlier in the week or in week number 1. The thing is with Belgium is that they are a very good offensive team. That's going to happen when you have Ferry Regers. However, they also make a boatload of errors to go along with it. And that's exactly what we saw in the Polish match, right? They dominated the match offensively, but they also handed Poland 34 errors throughout the match. They had a terrible ace to error ratio in the Poland match as well, making 21 service errors for just 4 aces, almost a 1-to-6 ace to error ratio. Really not good. And then they got served off the court in sets 3 and 4 when Poland started pulling off that reverse sweep. Obviously they were able to take care of business against China, but it was the same thing against Germany as well. They just handed them a boatload of errors. Although I do think they looked a little bit better against Germany. This is one of the few matches where they weren't playing straight up Rieger's ball and spreading it around a little bit. I thought Pierre Perrin was a lot better. Perrin stepped up big with 23 points, hitting a 68% with a 55% efficiency. And to be honest, I think against Turkey, everything just kind of imploded. And I just think the rest of the team, not named Ferry Regers, is able to keep up with the stamina it takes to play at this level consistently, right? Especially when you're playing in that Belgian league, whether you're playing for Massiek or Karak Roselair, you just don't play that many high intensity matches and you're used to steamrolling teams a lot. And that is not the case when you're playing at the VNL. And I know it's easy to point out that they're like, hey, they're just playing Rieger's ball. And I mean, with numbers like these, how can you not score 33 against Poland, 38 against China, 23 against Germany, 22 against Turkey? He's in second right now in the VNL in scoring, first in attacking. He has been outstanding. But at the same time, especially against Turkey, none of the other outside hitters are really showing up, and none of them were even hitting over 30%, not efficiency, hitting. So at a certain point, you just got to feed the only thing that's working. And at this point, I mean, Belgium leads the VNL in attack errors per set, but they also are second in the VNL in kills per set. So it's a highly offensive, highly volatile situation right now that Belgium has going on. But overall, going 1-3 in week number 2. I'm giving Belgium a C-. Ooh, this is going to be a big one. I mean, Brazil, man, there is no place like home, right? And that is exactly what Brazil must be feeling after they come crashing down, going 4-0 in week number 1 to 1-3 and barely making out alive against a struggling Canada in their final match. It was a complete 180 for this Brazilian team. I do not think I've seen a Brazilian team this offensively inept. They didn't have over a 30% efficiency all week long. Their offense was brutal. Only Darlin managed to score over 20 points with 26 points against Ukraine. And I mean, that's good because he was terrible against Bulgaria and Slovenia. Went 12 for 32, hitting a 37% with a 6% efficiency in both those matches. Now, luckily, he was a lot better against Canada, coming off the bench, going 11 for 19, hitting a 57% with a 42% efficiency, which was the only time all week any of Brazil's outside hitters hit over 40% efficiency. And I say thank God, because this new Brazilian savior that they have in Brian just really isn't it for me. He does not look like he is ready to play at this level, and he is not looking like the elite prospect that Brazilians have been telling me he is. Brian went a combined 20 for 49 with an 18% efficiency in the 3 matches he appeared in. It did not look great. But on top of that, you've got their captain, Lucarelli, who has no mojo either. He is kind of nowhere to be found. He was a combined 22 for 53 with a 20% efficiency on week number 2. Now, nothing worked for Brazil this week. Bernardinho was fighting with Mikey. Cachopa, or Cachapa, as some of the announcers are calling him, I don't know why we can't read, but that's another story altogether, was fighting with absolute everyone. And honestly, they're really lucky they bullied the ref against Canada, or else they would have gone an embarrassing 0-4. It was a brutal week 2 for Brazil, and because of that, I am giving them a D. Next up, we have Bulgaria. And now Bulgaria, I think this team looked fantastic in week number 2. First and foremost, they pulled off a historic win against Italy. The last time they beat Italy in a major competition, in a major international competition, goes all the way back to the London Olympics on August 6th, 2012, where they beat them in pool play. Don't ask what happened later on that tournament. That was the last time Bulgaria got a win over Italy. So that is massive. Followed it up with a barn burner of a match against a tough home team in Slovenia. You had Bulgaria, Slovenia, and Ukraine all looking really good, and Ljubljana just sharing wins and losses. Then they went toe-to-toe against Canada. Definitely not their best match, especially with the way Canada is playing. Shouldn't be going to 5 with them. And then finished off the week with a 3-1 win over a red-hot Ukrainian team. Now, the match against Italy, not only was it historic because it was their first time they beat them in almost 15 years, but also they were one Moni Nikolov point away from having all of their starters in double digits. It would have been awesome if they could have done that. And I think this is definitely how Bulgaria needs to play. Look at that spread. You've got Nikolov with 19, Atanasov with 14, Asparuhov with 13, Petkov and Grozanov with 10, Moni with 9. Chef's kiss for a massive win by Bulgaria. Unfortunately, they did go back to playing Alex ball in the match against Slovenia, giving him over 43% of the offense. But at the same time, I do think it's kind of hard to blame Moni for that when your team is only passing 9% perfect. And then you have Atanasov and Asparuhov going a combined 17 for 38 with a 21% efficiency. Now, I do think that the match against Canada was really big for a few reasons. Now, it was definitely Alex's worst match of the tournament, and this is what happens when he starts to get a lot of volume in serve receive. Yes, he passed the ball 27 times, but he also made 12 unforced errors, and that's really what kept Canada in that match. But this is also the match that Blingini finally brought in Denis Badarov, and Badarov was the one who really helped push them through this match, and then also in match number 4 against Ukraine. Denislav Badarov, who was fantastic in Turkey, finally got some playing time. He came in off the bench. Well, offensively, he wasn't fantastic against Canada. It was really his serve receive that helped Bulgaria quite a bit, passing 64% positive in both the match against Canada and against Ukraine. And then finally, also going 13 for 22, hitting a 59% with a 50% efficiency in the match against Ukraine as well. Now, I do think that if Badarov can continue being that secondary scoring outlet, especially now they're playing that 3 outside hitter system, it's really going to help open some things up offensively for Bulgaria and also take a little bit of that serve receive load off of Alex Nikolov. But regardless, going 3-1, getting their first win against Italy since 2012. It was a massive week for Bulgaria, and because of that, I'm giving them an A-. Next up, we have Canada. And I'm honestly not going to spend too much time on this because, yeah, it was a frustrating ass week as a Canadian fan going over. But I will say this, I actually don't think they looked as terrible as the scores actually suggest. They brought a much different lineup in week number 2 to Slovenia. There was no Mar, there was no Lepke, there was no Demyanenko, and then also there was no Landon Curry, who is out for the summer with a torn meniscus. And it started off really, really poorly against Slovenia, but they were able to crawl things back, win that second set, and against Slovenia, they had their opportunity to send it a 5 in that 4th set. And it was the same thing against Ukraine, right? It looked really, really bad against Ukraine, and Ukraine was coming off big wins over both Brazil and Italy, and Canada was able to get better and better against them, win that 3rd set. And there was transition opportunities late in that 4th set for Canada to send that one to a 5th set, and they were just not able to pull it out. Same thing in the match against Bulgaria. They had opportunities late in the 4th and the 5th to be able to win that match, and they weren't able to. And then the match against Brazil was just an absolute shit show of a match. Just errors all over the place, and it was just not great volleyball to watch all around. Now, as I said, I don't think it was that terrible of a week for Canada. Yes, the results really weren't there, but the process on the court, and we saw the flashes on the court of what could actually be happening with this team. We saw quite a bit more of Eric Sisna. I thought Pearson Ashenko, who had to step in a big way, played really, really well. Jackson Howe continues to be the best Canadian player on the court. There's just something missing. Canada is currently one of the worst offensive teams in the VNL. They are one of the worst serve receive teams in the VNL. However, they continue to be the best blocking team in the VNL. And that is in large part due to the play of Jackson Howe. I mean, he's been outstanding in the middle. He's got 11 more blocks than the next highest guy. He's averaging 8.89 blocks per set, which is just ridiculous. He's also leading Canada in scoring as a middle at 90 points. And now that is a little bit due to the fact that there's just been so much in and out with Show and Xander, and then, the outsides between Brody and Jackson Young and Eric Cisna, but still hitting 67% with a 55% efficiency. He's got 33 blocks and 28 touches. He has been in beast mode, hands down the best Canadian player so far, and I'm really happy for him. But overall, Canada going in 4, not being able to get the job done against Bulgaria, who are making a boatload of errors, against Brazil, who are making a boatload of errors, going 0-4. I'm giving them a D. There's no other way I can do that. Next, we have China, and honestly, I can't continue defending this Chinese team anymore. I really can't, especially now that they've gone and neutered Vital Heinen. I mean, we saw him react very interestingly when he got interviewed, basically saying, I can't be happy, so I'm just not going to say anything after he got fined after week 1. Makes sense. But ultimately, it's just really hard to believe in a Chinese team who can't even get a point against a bunch of non-playoff teams and Turkey, You have Argentina, who was winless before coming into this week. Belgium, who's going through their first time through the VNL. Turkey, who are down in the basement with them last year. And then Germany, who's also pretty good. But still, China looked a lot worse in week number 1 and couldn't even come away with a point. And the reality is, too, for me as a Canadian fan, is really hard because they are safe from the relegation just because they paid money to host the finals. At least they beat Cuba back in week 1. So Cuba is still winless, but still, overall, it has been frustrating to watch this Chinese team. They just can't get anything going offensively. In week 1, they were pretty good about limiting their errors, not so much in week number 2. And overall, going 0-4, not even getting a point against a bunch of non-playoff teams. I'm giving China an F. Now, I made excuses for Cuba in week number 1. They brought a younger roster. They are trying some things out. But in week number 2, this is just inexcusable. And honestly, at this point, I think Cuba might actually want to be relegated from the VNL. I think their players just don't want to play for this team at all because it is so hard to believe in a team that, unless, other than the game against France, they didn't look like they wanted to be there at all. They had no fight in them, and they're just a frustrating watch all around. There is no reason at all. This starting lineup in particular, that went all the way to the finals last year. You had a Marlon Yant, who was the top scorer last year. There's no reason at all that this particular lineup should be going 0-4, especially when you've got matches against Serbia and Iran. Even though they have some incredible offensive powers with guys like Yant and Lopez and Masso, they are one of the worst offensive teams in the VNL with just a 31% efficiency. Sometimes it seems like Lopez doesn't want to be there. Against USA, he had a negative efficiency. Serbia had a 19% efficiency. He was outstanding against France, though, and then kind of disappears in the other matches. And it's the same thing for Yant. I mean, he was a little bit better, but still, just not that confident Cuban team we expect to see. And the injury to Concepcion, that is an absolute dagger. Not only is because Concepcion is a guy who I've got an interview over the years. I consider him a homie. He seems like a great guy, but he's one of the few players on this Cuban roster who actually acts like he cares, along with Simon, obviously, who brings a little bit of fire to this team. So seeing him go down like that and not being able to play volleyball for the rest of the entire season and the rest of the year is a huge dagger to this Cuban team. And it's sad now because this Cuban team is firmly in last place. They are 0-8 with only 2 points. And it really sucks that it's possible that they will not be in the VNL next year. And it really sucks that I have to actively root against them because it's between either Canada or Cuba, right? It's the Norsica disaster this year in the VNL. But I'm going to say right now, Cuba has looked way worse than Canada. And I am disappointed with the way they played in week 2. They also get an F. They failed. Home is where the heart is, and that's clearly what France was waiting for. They went 1-3 in Ottawa in week 1, and they go 3-1 at home in Orléans during a heat wave without the AC. And I mean, it definitely wasn't pretty. At times, they went to 5 in 3 of their matches, but still, France has gotten back up and are no longer in the dog pile in the bottom. And now it was far from the aesthetic volleyball we expect from France. It was very, very sloppy at times. They averaged 7.44 errors per set in week number 2, which was up even higher from what they had in the first week, which was at 6.81 errors per set. The only match they didn't lead in errors was when they played Serbia, and that was because Serbia on the other side was just making a boatload of errors themselves. But at the same time, Serbia is also the team who makes the most errors in the VNL, so that makes sense. Now, there was some definitely better things from France in week number 2, especially from Matisse Henno. He looked much, much better and is now the leading scorer on this French team. The 21-year-old scored 75 points at home, hitting a 50% with a 36% efficiency. Not too bad for 21 years old. I was hoping to see a little bit more Amir Tizi Ouelou, but it was mostly Antoine Brizard. Now, overall, I do think France looked better, but at the same time, going to 5 against Cuba and Iran, just not that great of a look. The match against Japan was a really, really good one. However, they weren't able to pull it out. So overall, I'm giving France a B+ for going 3-1 at home in week 2. I honestly think it's unlucky the Germans didn't go 3-1 in week 2. And to me, it all comes down to the match against Argentina. That match honestly could have gone either way. And if it wasn't for just a few offensive slip-ups down the stretch by Germany, I think it would have gone the other way. And in week number 2, we saw a continuation of what we saw in week number 1. This German team scores by committee. You've got Erich Rohrs, you've got Tobias Brand, you have whoever is on the opposite, which is either Jan Boma or Philipp Jan. Week number 1, it was mostly Philipp Jan, although Jan Boma did take over the role in week number 2. You can really see this scoring by committee that Germany uses because none of their attackers have even reached the 100-point mark yet, but you have 4 of them who have scored over 70 points throughout the course of this VNL so far. And while sometimes I think that's really great, you have a lot of different options, but down the stretch, sometimes in gut check times, I think that's kind of the hindrance, right? I think that was actually the issue for them in the 5-setter against Argentina and in the match against Poland. They just don't really have that go-to guy to be like, hey, here's the ball. You're going to get us out of tough situations or you're going to go win us this match. Now, we did see Massimo Botti switch from Philipp Jan to Jan Boma, and especially in this match against Argentina, he scored 18, going 15 for 23. He did come off the bench and didn't start a set until the 5th set and still scored 18 points. Pretty damn good. That result granted him the starting spot for the rest of the week. He scored 67 points in week 2, hitting a 55% with a 40% efficiency. Now, it remains to be seen if he is going to be that go-to guy, but if they could have a Grosjean-esque type player to go to in tough spots, this German team would get really deadly, really, really quick. Germany going 2-2 in week 2. I mean, they beat the teams they should in Belgium and China, lost a tough one to Argentina, and then lost the match they should have against Poland. I'm giving them a B. I think of all teams in week 2, Iran maybe had the most frustrating week. They were just so close to pulling themselves out of the depths, going toe-to-toe with some of the best teams in the world in Japan and France. Well, France usually is. Currently, obviously isn't, but still, they could have been 3-1. Instead, they sit at 1-3 in the second week. Now, they couldn't pull off the upset against France in Orléans, despite the fact that France gifted them 10 more unforced errors. And similarly, against Japan, they got dummied in the first 2 sets. Their offense started clicking in sets 3 and 4, and then it completely imploded in the 5th. You know, they hit a 57% with a 53% efficiency in the 3rd and the 4th against Japan, which crashed down to a 38% hitting with a 25% efficiency in the 5th against Japan, where they weren't able to close it out. Inshallah, they beat Cuba in that final match, so they could say just above of that Norsika dumpster fire that is the relegation race, but still Iran a really tough look in week number 2. I'm giving them a C-. Now, you can split Italy's week straight down the middle. You got the first half where they just got bullied by Bulgaria and Ukraine, and then you got the second half where they looked really good against Brazil and Slovenia. Had you asked me going in, I would have thought maybe they would have had an easier time in the first half and then a harder time in the second half, but that's the way she goes sometimes. Now, their offense in the first 2 games was pretty abysmal. In both the match against Bulgaria and Ukraine, they had under a 25% efficiency, which is just unheard of for Italy in general. And now, I'm not going to say this is because they transitioned from Porro to Spertoli as their starting setter, but I will point out that that was one of the major changes this team made for week number 2. Luckily, that did get a lot better against both Brazil and Slovenia. They had a combined 51% with a 41% efficiency. Now, one of the other changes changes this roster did make was the return of Lavia as their captain. And now I was questioning that move at the beginning. I thought Botolo had been great. I didn't really see the need to make Lavia the captain. And I'll be honest, Lavia did not look great in his return to the Italian roster for the first time since last year's VNL. And Botolo is clearly miles ahead of him. I don't know where Lavia fits in their depth chart at the moment with guys like Luca Porro and Francesco Sani sitting on the bench behind him. The other big change we saw from the first and second match to the third and fourth was the change on the right side. Now, I did say in my last video about the men that I thought Rychlicki may had played his last matches for Italy, and I was a little surprised when he got the start in the beginning. I thought he played pretty good in the opener against Bulgaria, but then after that, it just went all downhill, and really the change from Rychlicki to Bo Valenta is what really helped them open up the offense. Bo Valenta scored 20 against Brazil and then 21 against Slovenia to lead Italy in scoring in both of those matches. And once again, with Romano still out there and Keita joining this team, I just really don't know if there's any more room for Kamil Rychlicki on this roster. And I think it is a little bit unlucky they had to play the juggernauts that were Bulgaria and Ukraine earlier in this week. You know, Bulgaria obviously switching some things up right now. They're looking really good. Ukraine as well. But I think especially that win over Slovenia, the way they just dominated, was just really indicative of what this Italian team can be, still without Gianelli and Micheletto and Romano and a bunch of their other guys. So because of all of that, I'm giving Italy a B- for week 2. It's honestly a miracle Japan made it out of week 2 as the only undefeated team remaining in the VNL, because as you see here, they went through the gauntlet going to 5 in all 3 of their final matches. But instead, they managed to pull it out and sit firmly atop of the VNL standings. Now, this Japanese team has won more 5-setters, 4 of them, this year than they did in all of last season. And they have had a big next man up mentality throughout it, right? They've used different setters. They've used different middles. They've gone with each of their opposites. Hell, even in the last match against France, when Ron wasn't the guy to go to, Ishikawa stepped up for his best match of the VNL, scoring 28 points. You know, they managed to fight off the return of Iran and fight off the reverse sweep. They won a barn burner of a match against the USA, one of the best matches we've seen so far, and then fought off after already playing 10 sets in the past few days. They fought off France at home in Orléans, handing them their only loss of the week. And I mean, it's not a secret how they're doing it. They have one of the best offenses in the VNL. They lead the VNL in kills per set. They're 3rd in points per set. They're 2nd in unforced errors. They're 3rd in service efficiency. Like, this Japanese team is just really good up and down the lineup. But they also have the best player in the VNL, in my opinion, so far, in Ran Takahashi. Ran has been absolutely unreal. And yes, I know for all you Twitter trolls out there who have called me racist in the past, this might be unbelievable for you. But yes, I 100% think that Ran Takahashi has been the best player in the VNL throughout this year. Ryan is a big reason this team is undefeated in the VNL, despite having one of the toughest schedules, and now they get to go home in week 3 and have one of the more easier schedules of all team in week 3. And to me, it looks like they're going to solidify that top spot, and a lot of it, in my opinion, is because of Rant. Now, for going 4-0, going the distance, this team looks a lot grittier than I've come to expect from past Japanese teams. I'm really enjoying the type of ball they're playing right now. I'm giving them an A. Now, Poland also went 4-0 at home in week number 2, and Gerbich said in an interview after they played Argentina that it seemed like all teams were playing their best matches of the summer against Poland, and honestly, you can make a case for it. Riegers dropped 33 against them. Lagumja dropped 31 against them. Argentina pushed them to the longest set in VNL history, winning 50-48. And still, Poland was able to remain perfect. They even bounced back after losing that set to Argentina to sweep the next 3. Poland was able to dominate at home, of course, by the addition of some of their starters. Bovand was great joining the lineup. He led them scoring in 2 different points. We saw Śliwka maybe have his best week returning to the Polish roster. He led them in scoring against Belgium. And then we saw Leon clean everything up with a 28 performance against Argentina. And I mean, Leon didn't even dress for the first 2 matches of the week. And on top of using that balance of some of the younger guys coming in, not really riding Leon all that much, seeing a bunch of different options, different different lineups, Poland has statistically been one of the best teams in the VNL so far. They lead the VNL in points per set. They also lead the VNL in unforced errors per set. So they're scoring the most and making the least amount of errors. They have the best serve efficiency in the VNL. They have the best kill efficiency in the VNL. They have really just been super solid. If there's one criticism I would give Poland, though, is the fact that they just really aren't using their middles so much, which is wild because, in my opinion, Poland has some of the best middles in the world. Only 18% of the offensive volume has gone to the middles. And it's not like it's been terrible either. They're hitting 59% with a 49% efficiency. And these numbers only so low because they hit a 30% efficiency against Belgium, where they were way above 50% in all of the other matches. There was even a point in a timeout where Gerbic was pleading Komenda to give a ball to the middle. And overall, it's just weird to me because, once again, Poland has some really good middles between Lemansky and Kubczak and Novak and Poreba. All of those guys are elite. On top of this, Poland, of all teams, has been a very average blocking team. They've been really good in serve and attack, but blocking, they currently sit in 9th in the VNL, averaging just 4.78 positive block touches per set. But, with everything else going on, the fact that the blocking is the one area they can improve in, and it's a one area we know that they're already pretty damn good in, Poland is sitting in a pretty damn good position. And because of that, I am giving them an A for going 4-0 at home in week number 2. Serbia was one of those surprising teams in week number 1, and they have come crashing down to earth in week number 2, going 1-3 in Orléans. Now, they did have a relatively tough schedule, losing to Japan, France, and the USA, only beating lowly Cuba, who has been terrible. But this is mostly due to the fact that their opposite, Vjeko Masulovic, did tweak his knee after the first match against Japan and did not play the rest of the week. Now, it was a big blow losing their leading scorer up to this point, and because of that, Serbia played an error-ridden style of volleyball that just was not pretty to watch. And they pretty much handed each one of these matches to their opponent, except for against Cuba, who have just been playing some terrible volleyball. But Serbia is currently leading the VNL in unforced errors per set. They're averaging 7.62 unforced errors per set. Not good. They also have the worst hitting efficiency in the VNL at just 24%. And they're averaging the least amount of kills per set as well. Yikes. Now, luckily for Serbian fans, Masulovic is expected to be back in week number 3, and that is a good thing since that team will be at home in Belgrade and they will seriously need him. For going 1-3 in week number 2 and just playing kind of an ugly style of volleyball, I'm giving Serbia a D+. The trend of teams playing really, really well at home continued with Slovenia, but in all fairness, they've looked really, really solid throughout the entirety of the VNL so far. They took care of business against Canada, battled against a really strong Bulgarian team, and then absolutely donged Brazil before kind of letting it get away against Italy. Now, Slovenia is the only team in the men's VNL to have 4 players averaging over 4 points per set. Nick Mujanovic is averaging 4.09, Tonček Stern is averaging 4.35, and Rok Mozic is averaging 4.12. All 3 of them are in the top 10 of points per set. All 3 of them were in double digits for their wins against Bulgaria and Brazil, and that's part of the reason why they're just so hard to defend. Low-key, I do think one of their unsung heroes, though, might be their libero, Jani Kovacic, because without his serve receive, this team would be nowhere. He has really stepped up and kind of forced his way into the serve receive, stepping in front of the other guys, and that's really what they need. Now, this lack of ability to serve receive didn't really affect them against Canada, Bulgaria, or Brazil, but it was really their Achilles heel against Italy, where they passed 31% positive and 14% perfect. And to me, the difference was the fact that they started Earnout over Mujanovic, and Mujanovic didn't come in till the 4th set. And when he did, he actually was a pretty good passing option. So I really think we're seeing him to start to improve and become an actual option for them in the long term on the left side. And who knows, if he had started, maybe it would have been a different result. I don't really think so. I think Italy was a bit of a truck at that point, but still, Slovenia looked really good at home in week number 1, and I'm giving them an A-. Man, talk about a breakout week for Turkey, going 3-1, and your only loss is a 5-setter against Poland. Yo, from the basement last year to now fighting for a playoff spot this year, all without your best player, that is huge for this Turkish team. And it just felt like in week number 2, everything kind of came together. You know, we've always known this Turkish team to be very, very talented. They've got guys like Adis Agumja, who's been one of the premier scorers this year. And I mean, dropping 30 on Poland is absolutely huge. But when he's not on, you've got Kaan Gurbuj coming in and leading them against Argentina. You've got Bediran Bulbul, who continues to be one of the more underrated middles in the world. He scored 46 points over the course of this week, and he is 3rd in VNL blocking overall. But to me, the play of Gökçen Yüksel was outstanding in week number 2, having his best matches against China, Poland, and Argentina. Not only was he able to help balance out that scoring and give them a threat on the left side, but he was really able to help solidify their serve receive, especially against Poland and Argentina. And that gives this Turkish team a really rare ability to be able to attack from all positions on the court. When you've got Bulbul in the middle, Adis Agumja or Gurbuj on the right side, and then Gökçen on the left side, that gives a lot of options for Yeni Pazar to go to. And honestly, that's one of the reasons why I think they're currently sitting in a playoff position. They can attack from all 3 positions on the court, and they have depth to cause a lot of problems. And once again, they're doing this all without their best player in Efe Mandarache. So if we're going 3-1 in week 2, all without your best player, and your only loss is a 5-setter to Poland, I'm giving Turkey an A. Now, I think we all knew Ukraine was going to be good with the return of Ole Plotnitsky to the lineup, but I don't think anyone anticipated that they would be this good. They dominated Brazil and Italy in the early parts of this week, really sending a message to the rest of the volleyball world. Especially against Italy, where they hit 60% as a team with a 51% efficiency. That is huge. And they just have so much firepower on the pins. And I mean, they are already pretty good with Kovalev and Yanchuk and Tupci, but now you add in Plotnitsky, who's a legit top 10 outside hitter in the world. And they just have so much firepower in addition to being a very, very good blocking team. The addition of Plotnitsky means that they have 3 almost interchangeable outsides along with Kovalev and Yanchuk. And Tupci continues to be a top 10 scorer in the VNL so far. And they can just overwhelm teams with scoring in every stage of the game. They are 2nd in the VNL in points per set, 3rd in aces per set, 1st in block points per set, and they have the 3rd best attack efficiency as well. Honestly, I think the big reason they didn't go 4-0 is because Bulgaria brought in Badarov. They had no video on him and no real answer for him. But otherwise, this Ukrainian team has become a real threat and gotten really, really deadly really quick. Because other than the match against Bulgaria, they were pretty much flawless. And because of that, I am giving them an A-. Another week of the VNL and another week of the USA looking incredibly solid. Now, they bulldozed through Cuba and Ukraine before narrowly losing one of the best matches of the VNL to Japan, and then got the job done against Serbia to close out the week at 3-1. The addition of Micah Christensen has been huge. It's brought them from the 8th best kill efficiency to the 2nd best kill efficiency in the VNL so far. They have the best aggregate rank across these 16 categories that I stat at an average of a 4.5. Now, that is the best average aggregate rank of any team. They are top 5 in 13 of the 16 categories and top 3 in 9 of the 16 categories. Now, Jake Haynes continues to be their best offensive player. He is currently 3rd in points per set, averaging 4.64 points per set, behind just Riegers and Nikolov. Going 13 for 18 against Cuba is just gross. But on top of that, the US has pretty much rolled the lineups. Karch used every single player on the roster in week number 2, and only Gabby Garcia Fernandez, who looks like he's pretty much going to be their serving sub, and Matt Nagy didn't start a match in week number 2. Now, the US dominated most of their match. As I said, the U.S. dominated most of their matches, and other than that loss to Japan, they are pretty much flawless. They are currently sitting in 2nd place and are putting themselves in a really good position for the finals. Because of that, I'm giving the U.S. an A-. And that does it for my grades of the men's VNL week 2. Let's go over them real quick. Argentina got a B-, Belgium a C-, Brazil a D, Bulgaria an A-, Canada a D, China an F, Cuba an F, France a B+, Germany a B, Iran a C-, Italy a B-, Japan A, Poland A, Serbia D+, Slovenia A-, Turkey A, Ukraine A-, and USA an A-. It seems like there's a lot of teams on either end of the spectrum in week number 2. But what do you guys think? Do you agree? Do you disagree with some of my rankings? Let me know either way down below in the chat. Week number 3 for the men kicks off on July 15th. Now make sure you give this video a like, subscribe to Volleyball Source, hit that bell for all of the little notifications. Make sure to join us over on the Volleyball Source Discord, the best online volleyball community in the world. And also follow me over on Twitch at That Volleyball Guy. I'll see you guys soon.